Mr. Clerk, please record.
There's a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any corrections for the journal?
I have no corrections this morning.
Thank you. Are there any messages, reports, or announcements?
I do, Mr. President. New A bill, Legislative Bill 35A from Senator DeBoer. It's a bill for enacting appropriations, appropriates funds to aid in the carrying out of the provisions of Legislative Bill 35. Additionally, Legislative Bill 753A from Senator Linehan. It's a bill for enacting appropriations, appropriates funds to aid in the carrying out of the provisions of Legislative Bill 753. That's all I have this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We will now proceed to the first item on the agenda.
You want to do announcements first?
I do. Okay. All right. Actually, on a side note, we'd like to welcome Dr. Teresa Hatcher from Senator Vargas' district, sitting underneath the north balcony. If you'd please stand and be recognized. And on a side note, the cookies being handed out are in honor of Senator Frederickson's birthday. Happy birthday. Senator DeBoer for an announcement.
Colleagues, today is a special day. I would like to note that on this day in history, a statesman was born. He is a leader in areas of mental health, in business, and also natural resources, and a devoted husband and father, and an amazing friend, and an enviable colleague. It is our very own Senator John Frederickson's birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We will now proceed to the first item on the agenda. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Erdman would move to suspend the rules, specifically Rule 2, Section 2, Rule 3, Section 4F, and Rule 7, Section 6, to provide that for the remainder of the 108th Legislature, first session, only one motion to postpone to a time certain to commit or to postpone indefinitely shall be offered on the same day at the stage of the bill or proposition.
Senator Erdman, you are now welcome to open. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. So today I bring you a rule change, an opportunity for us to change the rules to proceed with doing the work that we were sent here to do. Let me read what we're going to try to do, what the rule change is going to be, and then I have a few comments that I would like to make, and then I will yield some time to Speaker Arch for his comments. So this motion is to suspend rules, the rules, Rule 2, Section 2, Rule 3, Section 4F, Rule 7, Section 6, to provide for the remainder of the 108th legislative session, first session, only one motion postponed to a time certain to commit or to postpone indefinitely shall be offered on the same day at the same stage of debate of the bill or proposition. Here's what this will do. If adopted, this motion suspends the rules pertaining to the process for amending the permanent rules of the legislature. That's Rule 2, Section 2, Rule 3, Section 4F, and would put in place the change to Rule 7, Section 6, to limit the members of the legislature to offer a motion to bracket to a time certain, a motion to recommit a bill to committee, and a motion to postpone indefinitely only once each day at each stage of debate. We are not prohibiting the use of these motions. We're just limiting to once per day on each stage of debate. Why do I offer these rule changes? This proposed rule change is similar to a rule change that came before the Rules Committee at the beginning of the session. The Rules Committee at that time chose not to include the change in the rules proposal package, but I'm sure we would have if we had foreseen the extent this rule would have been relied upon this year as we continue debate on the floor. So this has been used as a delay tactic and not a sincere attempt to bracket, to recommit, or IPP a bill. The fact that the rule change was introduced in January to the Rules Committee indicates the issue of senators abusing the rule is not a new one. This proposed rule change does nothing to take away or limit a member's right to filibuster a bill. What this proposed rule change will do is help focus the debate on the bill before us, not the tactic of using procedural motions to delay. Although this proposal will not limit, also this proposed amendment will not eliminate this practice altogether, but puts limits on it. Using multiple procedural motions on a bill to talk about another bill is not a way a legislature should operate. This rule is currently written, as this current rule is currently written, it allows that to happen easily. And that was a great example of that last Thursday when there were 15 bracket motions in a row. That limited everyone else that was in the queue. And when I looked at the queue when those motions began, there was 30 plus people with their lights on. So it eliminated those people from having an opportunity at all to speak. The proposed rule change will still allow a one-time offering of each motion on the same day at the same stage of debate. By allowing the motions to be used once each day, the proposed rule change will continue to ensure a senator can seriously debate the value of getting a bill off the agenda by bracketing, recommitting to committee, or indefinitely postponed. As Speaker Arch mentioned Friday, there's a balance between allowing opponents of a bill to adequately express their views in debate and the ability for a legislature to work efficiently. You in this body, all of us in this body have worked hard and long on bills that we have worked on for a long time. Those bills are in jeopardy of not even coming to the floor this year because of what has happened in the first 50 days. It is time for us to move on. I think this rule change is a fair rule change so that we can have full and fair debate on the bills as presented, and we move forward with doing the work that the people sent us here to do. I would encourage you to vote for this. Now, what you will hear today, probably, I'm just making an assumption, you will hear that we can't do this in one motion. You will hear that we can't do this because we've not done this before. And you will hear all of those excuses to why we shouldn't adopt this rule change. But what I'm asking you is if you liked the way things went the first 50 days, then vote against this rule change. If you'd like to get your bill to the floor and get it passed, then vote for this rule change. It's very simple. It's an up or down vote. This is not amendable. It's not divisible. We will vote on this rule change just as is submitted today, and I would encourage you to vote in the affirmative. I yield the rest of my time to Speaker Arch.
Senator Arch, you are yielded 4 minutes and 35 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Senator Erdman. I do rise in support of this rule suspension and the action. So I want to talk about a number of things before we begin our debate. One is the purpose of the rules, and I think it's important to remember that the rules belong to us as the legislature. Mason's manual says the purpose of rules is to aid a body to perform its duties more efficiently and with fairness to its members. If a rule conflicts with how a legislature wishes to proceed, a legislative body is well within its rights to alter a rule to efficiently conduct business. Assuming that the legislature is acting within the confines of the state constitution, it has complete authority concerning its procedure. Another piece of Mason's legislative manual in Section 1, the necessity for rules of procedure. Section 1, sub 3, rules of procedure fulfill another purpose in protecting the rights of members. Individual members, for example, are entitled to receive notices of meetings and the opportunity to attend and participate in the deliberations of the group. Minorities often require protection from unfair treatment on the part of the majority. And this next sentence, I think, is equally important. And even the majority is entitled to protection from obstructive tactics on the part of minorities. I think that this rule change is an attempt to strike the balance that I mentioned on Friday, that Senator Erdman just mentioned now, that balance between efficient flow of the bills and protecting the rights of people to object to the bill. The third thing I want to talk about is this issue of suspending the rules. And I know that there's some questions about, can the rules be suspended for more than a day? But I want to clarify that. We are suspending the rules to amend the rules. Once that is accomplished, the rules are no longer suspended. Everybody understand that? We're suspending the rules to amend the rules, and once that's accomplished, the rules are no longer suspended. This suspension is only for today. What is being suspended is a requirement for a hearing on a rules change. It also does not obligate future legislatures, and it terminates at the end of the session. Fourth point, clarification of the intent of the change. I think there's some questions as well, but Senator Erdman said it. All three priority motions can be introduced, but not just one of those priority motions, but all three can be introduced, but only once. And so it's not like only one of those priority motions can be introduced, and I just wanted to clarify that. Third question, can a body suspend a rule and take a separate action in the same motion? And I want to point to a couple of examples of this has been done by this body. In 2021, Senator Halloran introduced LR 14 calling for a constitutional convention. Senator Flood made a motion to suspend Rule 3, Section 20D, so as to provide that LR 14, quote, not stand as indefinitely postponed. The body adopted the motion, and with that vote, the bill was moved from IPP to being revived and sitting in government committee. So in other words, there was no subsequent action necessary. It was all one motion. It was a motion to suspend and then to pull that IPP off that bill. It was all done with one single motion. Second example, the motion to suspend the rules and IPP bills amended into other bills has been a part of our sine die motions for the odd number sessions since 1999. So here's the motion. To suspend Rule 6, Section 3 and 5, and Rule 7, Section 3 and 7, and to indefinitely postpone the following bills whose provisions have been included in another enacted legislation, and then it enumerates the bills. So in other words, again, the motion to suspend to accomplish this act, and we do that every year at the close of the odd number of years of the session. So with that, I would simply say, I don't believe the question is, can the body take this action? But the question is before us, should this body take this action? And that's a legitimate question. So I believe that the question of should is the question to be debated going forward, but the question of can, I think, is clear. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senators Erdman and Arch. With that, Senator Conrad, you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. Look no further than this morning's Journal Star, and you will see the headline which says, Rules Proposal Problematic, in big, bold type. Read the story further. You will see this crude attempt is defined as unprecedented in the Nebraska legislative history. So to my friend, Speaker Arch's position, can we? Yes. We do have the ability to set the course in terms of process. Should we? No, we should not. But what he conveniently left out, which is critical and to the heart of this matter, is how we go about it, because process does matter. Senator Erdman, my friend Senator Erdman, chair of the Rules Committee, has filed what is a crude attempt kind of based on a pre-cloture type of opportunity in the historical record to stop debate. So number one, it's already inapplicable to the present context because we have a cloture rule which has changed that process. Additionally, this motion, which is masquerading as a rule suspension, conflates the existing history and the rules on their face and the understanding from Masons, and really contains four distinct proposals. One, to suspend the rules. Two, to suspend the rule amendment and the committee hearing process. And don't gloss over that, friends. We know when we seek to amend the rules, when we introduce a bill, it is subject to public hearing. This circumvents the will of the second house. It circumvents our process. And don't forget, for a moment, hundreds of people turned out to our rules process hearings at the beginning of the session because they care about this institution and wanted to weigh in. So Senator Erdman says we don't need a vote. We don't need to have a public hearing. We don't want the input from the citizenry because they probably wouldn't like the result. Number three, this seeks to amend the permanent rules regarding priority motions to a new rule of procedure. And number four, it suspends beyond one legislative day to the remainder of the session. Can you suspend the rules? Absolutely. Do we need to have that safety valve? Absolutely. It comes up in the context, we've used it a couple of times sparingly and appropriately this session, and I'll refresh your recollection to that regard. A gubernatorial appointee couldn't make it to their public hearing, so we had to suspend the rules in regards to the notice to reschedule that. Those are the instances where you use a rules suspension, not because you have sour grapes about how people have utilized the rules to organize debate. And let's be clear about that. A motion strategy has been used in the history of this body in a variety of different contexts, and it had to be utilized last week in regards to organizing debate, because every time the minority attempts to engage in the process, Senator Erdman and his allies quickly call the question. When the queue is full, when we're trying to engage in deliberative, serious, robust debate. So the tyranny of the majority, again, it's not enough to win. It's not enough to win. We have to silence. We have to throw away the institution. We have to throw away the rules that you unanimously adopted and agreed to about 50 days ago. And this is not necessary from a legal or policy or practical standpoint. There's no need to break precedent. The result, if adopted against the history and practice and tradition and spirit and intent of our rules, will not save time, will not bring your bills to the floor any more quickly. A filibuster will flow like water around the existing rules that you put forward. Senator Kavanaugh reached out to Senator Erdman and Senator Speaker Arch and said, if you're upset about it, we'll come to an agreement and not utilize it. They push forward. They're not interested in consensus. They're interested in a punitive attempt to again silence the majority, like I was silenced in committee and y'all sat there. As senators come to committee and refuse to answer questions, as you cut off the voice of the second house at the hearings, and now you cut off their representatives' voice and ability to use the rules that you agreed to because you have sour grapes about how the rules were utilized last week. I have a lot more to say on this, Mr. President, but be clear, colleagues, this is problematic and unprecedented. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator Mosier, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraska. Well, so begins the discussion of the future of this legislative session. This rule suspension is unprecedented, that's true, but the actions concerted by some members of opposition to 574 last week was unprecedented also. It eliminated the possibility for supporters of the bill to speak because there were, in the teens, priority motions that preempted the supporters of the bill from speaking. Much has been trumpeted in this body about George Norris and his spirit in putting together a unicameral. I believe when George Norris envisioned this, he thought we would move forward with one more unified purpose and a higher calling rather than using the one house system to try to dominate the discussion of bills. This rules change will not stop filibusters. You can still filibuster, but it will even the scale so that each side can enter into debate. It would rule out the kind of maneuver that we had last Thursday, where I believe it was 15 priority motions were entered in a concerted effort by one side of an issue to dominate the debate. That was not in the spirit of George Norris. That was not in the spirit of collegiality. That was not in the spirit of helping move forward the goals of the citizens of Nebraska. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mosier. Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I rise in opposition to the motion to amend, and just listening to Senator Erdman, the chair of the Rules Committee, and Speaker Arch, the leader of this body, talk about the necessity to circumvent the rules to make a change to the rules. So on the board, it says it's a rule suspension, but you heard both of them discuss that this is actually a move to amend the rules. We have a process for amending the rules. And as Speaker Arch said, it's not a question of can, it's a question of should. And I guess I would agree with that assessment. This is a question of whether we should do it this way. And you have the chair of the Rules Committee who is empowered to hold this hearing within 5 days, which is what the rules require currently, and report out any rules. And you have the speaker who would then be empowered to schedule that rule change. So what you're doing here is circumventing the rules in an unprecedented way to deal with an unprecedented problem, but you don't need to do that. You could do exactly what you strive to do here within the confines of the rules, within the confines of normal procedure, and it would take essentially 3 more days than it's currently taken. And so honestly, I don't know where I would come down on the substance of the rule change. I've had a number of conversations with people about what's appropriate and whether, as Senator Mosier said, the unprecedented actions illustrate perhaps a flaw in the rules that need addressing. But whether that is true or not needs to be elucidated at a hearing and have a conversation, because the method that Senator Erdman is undertaking here is the wrong method to change these rules. This is an abuse of the system in an attempt to address what he sees as an abuse. And so my suggestion to everyone here would be to vote against the suspension. Let's put this into the Rules Committee to have a hearing, to have a discussion. Senator Erdman, I think, pointed to the fact that Speaker Arch brought a similar resolution to the Rules Committee this session, but it was distinguished in a very important way. Speaker Arch's proposal would have only allowed the motion by one person, which meant other senators could still make that motion on that bill on that day, which is a different drafting of this rule. It is a different contemplation of how it would work out, and it doesn't hinder the ability of other senators to make a motion under their own independent judgment. Under this rule as drafted, it would prevent me from taking an action because of an action another senator has taken. So I think there are certainly reasonable ways you could address this issue, but you need to do it within the regular order of the legislature. There are a number of problems with how this is being introduced, aside from the fact that how it addresses the issue. So I'm going to oppose the rule suspension as is, but, well, I guess I would ask if Senator Erdman would yield to a question.
Senator Erdman, would you yield?
Yes.
Hello? There we go. Thank you. Senator, you said this is, and you are moving to amend the rules for the remainder of the session,
That's correct.
and you said that this motion is not
1 minute.
amendable. Thank you. This motion that you propose is not amendable or divisible?
That's right.
So in the normal course of a debate about rules, is a rule change amendable?
In the normal course of
A debate about the rules, is a rule change amendable?
I'm not sure. What are you asking? You're asking if we did this through the hearing process and it came to the floor, then we could amend the rules there?
Yes.
I don't believe so.
Well, I guess I would tell you
You
that
asked my opinion, right?
that may be your opinion. In the normal
my
course of a rules debate, and a rule comes to the floor, you can propose amendments and they can be debated. And my point is that everybody might want the outcome here. Thank you, Senator. That everybody might want, or many people might want the outcome here, but you may not want the specific outcome that this rule proposes. And so going through the normal process, having a hearing, gets people to allow to come and criticize it,
That's
to point
time,
out
Senator.
problems. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Wishart would like to welcome 5 members from Leading Age Nebraska from across Nebraska in the North Balcony. Would you please stand and be recognized? Senator Blood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, I stand opposed to Senator Erdman's motion. And I want to read a quick email from one of my constituents. Senator Blood, Senator Erdman's motion is infuriating. I hope you voice objection to it. You don't change the rules in the middle of the game because you don't like how the game is going. Rules are rules and you follow them. That is the point of the Rules Committee hearings at the beginning of the session. Everyone had an opportunity to introduce rules, one of which was the one in question. The Rules Committee decided not to adopt it. Therefore, the opportunity has come and gone. The next time rules should change is the beginning of session when everyone is agreeing to the rules. I just want to point out that we're in a fishbowl. We frequently forget that people are watching us, that a lot of people are watching us even more so this year, and they know the rules. And they want to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I hope that that's exactly what debate is about. I know that this is something that Senator Brewer, I can't tell if he's there because McDonald's in the way, but there's a military term called paradox of power. And I kind of feel that that's what we're doing right now. Like the more that certain people dig in their heels, the more pushback they get. So it's going to be a very interesting debate and a very interesting rest of the year. With that, I would yield any time that I have left to Senator DeBoer.
Senator DeBoer yielded 3 minutes and 23 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Blood, for the time. Colleagues, I'm going to spend some time this morning talking about some things because I have a number of things to say. And if you have time, I would love it. So you can yield it to me. The first thing I want to say, though, is I'm sorry to this body. Last Thursday, what happened with the parade of motions, that was a direct result of my failure of leadership. And that was no one else's fault. That was no one else's failure of leadership. That was my failure. As the ranking member of the Rules Committee, I'm vice chair, that was opposing that bill. And because I knew what was going to happen, I should have objected to it and thought about the consequences. I didn't. When someone asked me if I thought such a procedural move would make people more mad, I said I didn't think they could get more mad, which both means I was wrong and also that that wasn't the right question. Because the right question was whether it was the right thing to do. So if you're mad about last Thursday's procedure, that's on me. Be mad at me, because I'm the one who failed there. I should have stopped that because of the reasons that you all will articulate. We're in an arms race where we're all trying to manipulate the rules and the power that we have in any way that we can. And arms races never end well. So today I would like to ask us to pause in the arms race, to have an armistice of sorts. What I would like to say is that this does need a hearing. It needs a hearing because it is vastly different than the one that was proposed in January, which limited the member. This limits the body. That is a very significant difference. There are alternatives we could consider. For example, we could consider whether we would allow the repeat motion by majority vote. We could consider that. It would still have the same effect of preventing a misuse of the rules. We could make the repeat motion something that happens only in unanimous, the withdrawing of the repeat motion only by withdrawing with unanimous consent, as we do for something which has been amended of this type. There are a variety of discussions we could have about whether
That's time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. And Senator DeBoer. Senator Raybold, you're recognized.
Good morning, fellow Nebraskans watching today on TV, and good morning, colleagues. You know, I love debate. I love free and fair debate. And I agree with everything that Senator Conrad has said and Senator Mosier. I think the Nebraskans watching us debate want to hear us discuss the issues fully and fairly. And I know that the Nebraskans that I talk to that reach out to me, they say they want us to focus on issues that are helpful to them, to their families, and to our state. They don't want us to focus on hurtful and hateful legislation like this body has been trending towards, and that is disturbing. So I understand why my colleagues have been standing up and challenging and using every tool in the arsenal imaginable to stop hateful, hurtful debate. However, I love rules as well. I think of Ernie Chambers. He was a master at working within the rules and guidelines, as every governing body should. And you know what we're trying to do right now? We are trying to change the rules right in the middle of a session, rules that we all adopted. And Senator Arch, I have to tell you that we're not working under Masonic rules at this point in time. We are working with the rules in our orange rule book today. Can you imagine during a football game, they change the rules and say, okay, you can only pass once, you can only carry the ball 2 times. That is so unimaginable. I am willing to support some of these changes, but we have rules and guidelines that tell us when we can change the rules. And I ask my colleagues to follow the rules. And it says clearly, I am not an attorney, but I can tell you I have been working with real estate law for 35 years. And as a person who's a non-lawyer, you go to the plain English language as a guiding force on how to interpret and proceed with any law. And I just want to read it clearly so my colleagues understand. It says the permanent rules may be amended by a 3/5 majority vote of the members elected, provided any proposed amendment must first be referred to the Committee on Rules for consideration and report. That is the course of action. That is the course of action I will support. And Mr. President, I would like to yield the rest of my time to Senator DeBoer.
Senator DeBoer, 2 minutes, 15 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Raybold. Senator Raybold was pointing out a very good point, which I do want to make at some point, and I don't want to be disjointed in my conversation as I have these little snippets with you, but there is a significant difference between suspending the rules for a particular action and amending the rules. And you can't get around that difference by saying we're suspending to amend. Folks are saying that we shouldn't change rules midstream, and I would get even more nuanced with that and say we have a process within the rules for changing rules even midstream. But that process is not the process we're following here. We need to have a public hearing on this. The underlying rule change, I'm not against. What I'm against is using the rules improperly to do this particular thing, because we are amending the rules, but we're doing it, calling it a suspension of the rules. This has in fact been addressed by this body before.
1 minute.
I'll come back to that when I have a little more time all at once, but it happened in 1975. Spoiler alert, there's a familiar face in that debate, which we'll get to in a little bit. We can change the rules if we do it the proper way, but this is not the proper way, and there's a reason why this is not the proper way. Because if we we'll just do this suspend motion to amend rules, why would we ever use the proper channels to amend the rules? We do not want to, first, cut out the public, and second, with respect to rules, act in the heat of the moment. The 3 days that you need to have a hearing, the public hearing, and then the action by the committee allows us all to take a beat.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Senator Ballard would like to welcome his father, Jim Ballard, from Raymond, Nebraska, and friend Phil Wharton from Lincoln, Nebraska, sitting under the south balcony. Please stand and be recognized. Senator Duncan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise today opposed to the motion to suspend the rules. I think part of the issue that we're talking about here is what's precedented and what's not, but we're also talking about what is the purpose of the rules that we actually have. One of the things that I think the rules exist to do is to protect the voice of the minority. There's been a lot of articles written over the last year or so about the numbers we have in this body. And one thing that those who pay attention at home or the people in this body know is that there are certain numbers that different sides seek to have in order to essentially control the debate. A lot of conversation surrounds are there 17 who feel this way about this thing, or are there 33 who feel this way about that thing? And the reason those numbers matter is that the rules that we currently have in our rule book were implemented in order to protect against majoritarian rule. And one of the things that makes Nebraska, I think, incredibly special is that we have this unique unicameral that operates under a procedure that allows us to allow minority voices to be heard. And I think the entire purpose of the rules and the entire structure that we have here is to make sure that we don't fall under majoritarian rule. A simple Google search, you'll come up with quotes from founding fathers about how majoritarian rule or rule of the majority was a part of what we were trying to prevent by having these checks and these balances. And so while I understand the frustration that some in this body feel regarding some of the strategy or tactics that are used from time to time, I don't believe it's improper to ensure that the voices of others are heard. And especially if we hearken back to the debate that we're talking about from last week, I mean, what we're talking about are the rights of trans kids to dictate their own medical care through consultation with doctors and families. And why I think that's important is we had this intense, heavy conversation on Thursday not to piss a bunch of people off, but to make sure that folks were hearing the plight of those who frankly go unrepresented on a regular basis and really don't often have their voices heard. And so rather than steamroll this process, I think what folks in this body were attempting to do, myself included, was to make sure that we took a beat and we listened to what people actually had to say and talk about this very important issue. So again, the whole purpose we're talking about here is just to make sure that we slow things down and have a conversation. And frustrating though it may be from time to time, the rules are in place to allow minority conversation to be heard. So with that, I do want to continue a conversation here that Senator Kavanaugh brought up as well. And with his questions he had with Senator Erdman, in our rule book, we have Rule 2, Section 2, which specifically talks about rules, suspension, and amendment. And in even the title of that section, it separates them out into three separate things. So a rule to suspend, or a motion to suspend and a motion to amend are two entirely different subjects covered in there. It starts by saying the rules may only be suspended by a 3/5 majority of the elected members by a machine vote, and such a motion shall not be amendable or divisible. New sentence. The permanent rules may be amended by a 3/5 majority vote of the members elected, provided that any proposed amendment must first be referred to the Committee on Rules for consideration and report. Two separate clauses. One of them talks about rule suspension, the other talks about rule amendment. And the fact that those are delineated into two separate sentences, I think is important. And so I would join in the concerns that my colleagues have raised here today about how this motion for a rule suspension encapsulates multiple motions that frankly should be, thank you, Mr. President, that frankly should be separated out. And as it's currently stated, this is just a motion to suspend the rules. This is not a motion to amend the rules. A plain reading of what's been proposed here, if this passes, merely suspends the rules. I believe we would still need a motion to amend. And I think that motion to amend is also debatable, amendable, and divisible. And this is a motion to suspend for the purpose of, it is not a motion to suspend in order to, in that moment, effectuate the change. So colleagues, the words matter, the rules matter. I am a lawyer, and I do read this particularly, and I do read this as two separate things. And so think about that as you're voting for this, and I would urge those essentially making the decisions here to understand that if this passes, it is just a rule suspension. It is not a rule amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Duncan. Senator DeBoer, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, good. So I have a minute to discuss this again. Senator Duncan was spot on with the difference between a motion to amend and a motion to suspend for a particular action. A motion to suspend for a particular action can be self-actualizing. A motion to suspend to amend is not a thing that we can do. Also, we can't do this, amend the rules until a date certain, as far as I could tell. I did not see any capacity within the rules to amend until a date certain. We have a motion to amend, we have temporary rules, we have permanent rules, all of those things, but what we're doing here is an amalgam. And it is attempting to use a motion to suspend the rules to get around the motion to amend. Now, you may all be frustrated enough that you say, to heck with it all. To heck with it all. Yes, we're doing something that's not constituted by our rules. To heck with it all. I'm so tired of this filibuster. Well, we've been here for 50 days or whatever day we're on right now. I ask you, 3 more to do it right. What's 3 more to do it right? And I say that in the context of this particular thing. This rules change and the particular way in which it is seeking to be amended will not stop the way in which we are all sort of stuck here while this filibuster occurs. This rule doesn't stop the filibuster. You'd have to line up about 25 rule changes to stop the ability of someone to filibuster. And I'm not sure that that's something we want to do, first of all. And also, I'm sure someone could outsmart me and find a way to still filibuster, because filibuster is the default setting. Our cloture rules and our rules to stop filibustering are the rules that go in place to try to control the filibuster. But the default is that people can speak as long as they want about whatever motion is in front of us, whatever amendment is in front of us, whatever bill is in front of us. So the question here is, are we going to do this the right way, or are we going to try to muscle it through? And the reason that I think we shouldn't, as a matter of policy, in addition to the rules themselves, besides not being effective at what you really want to do, which is stop the filibuster, is that we should not be amending rules, which is why our rule book imagines it this way, in the heat of the moment. We should not be amending rules willy-nilly. Now, some may argue that this is not willy-nilly because we've been sitting here. But this discussion of this motion and changing it in this way, I would argue, is pretty abrupt, considering there are a variety of ways that we could modify this rule that have not been discussed. Like, you can do 2, and you can only withdraw the second one with unanimous consent. You can do 2, and you can only withdraw the second one with the appreciation and support of the majority of the body, with a vote. Because Colleagues, it's very seldom true
1 minute.
that a motion to reconsider is successful. Very seldom true. In the time that I'm here, I don't think I've seen it done before. And yet, with Senator Lowe, I don't know if it was a priority bill or if it was the committee he leads priority bill, but with his bill last week, I think that was last week, maybe it was the week before, it's very hard to remember weeks here. We reconsidered the motion and it was successful. And it's good that it was successful because otherwise that bill would have been a mess. We wouldn't have been able to pass it. We wouldn't have been able to pass the pieces of it that we wanted to pass. So we have these in place not to be broken, to be used, not to be abused, and sometimes, okay, maybe there's something that has to go in place to stop abuse of the rules, but let's have a discussion.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Senator Breeze, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I represent the 41st District. I represent rural interests. I represent ag interests. And as such, I'm really part of a shrinking minority in this body. And because of that, I do not take any proposed rule suspension lightly. But here I would submit to you that the integrity of the legislative process truly is at stake. And the rule suspension here is warranted in order to get this fixed. And I want to thank Senator Erdman, Chair of the Rules Committee, for bringing this to us. This change is necessary. Why is that? I'm not going to criticize the opponents of 574 for what they did Thursday. They're entitled to use what is at their disposal to oppose something that they fiercely opposed. But I do think it's a bad look for this body. It's a bad look for this body for either side to completely silence, censor, cancel the comments or the debate from the other side. It flies in the face of good government to completely stifle legitimate debate on a very important issue. And that's what happened Thursday. And we owe it to Nebraskans to ensure that that doesn't happen again. And we need to get it done now. And again, I thank Senator Erdman for bringing this to us in this format. We need to get it done. And with that, I'd like to yield the rest of my time to Senator Erdman.
Senator Erdman, 3 minutes, 26 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Breezy. I appreciate that. So we've heard a lot of discussion about we should have a hearing. And by the way, I said this to Senator DeBoer off the mic. I didn't realize that she was the chairperson for the Democrats. But now I know who I can speak with. But I really find that peculiar because we're nonpartisan. So that's kind of a peculiar thing. So we continue to have what George North put in place called the unicameral, and if we had a bicameral, we wouldn't be here talking about this stuff today. We have given numerous and plentiful opportunity to the minority to have their voices heard and to share their opinions. It's called the minority. That's the way it is. So we did have a rule that was submitted by Senator Arch in the Rules Committee, and I'll read it to you so you make sure that you understand what we did. His proposed rule change was no motion to postpone to time certain, to recommit, or to postpone indefinitely being offered shall again be allowed on the same day at the same stage of the bill or proposition by the same member. That's the only difference, the same member. And as I said in my opening, had we known they were going to do what they did last Thursday, we would have taken this motion up, this change. In the rules, we'd have done that. So when I concluded my comments earlier, I said, you're going to hear all this whining about we can't do this, and I said whining. Senator Conrad did make one statement that was truthful. We can do this. All right, so she did make a truthful statement about that. We can and we will, or we should. I don't know what the will of the body is, but I'll tell you this. You're getting a taste, you're beginning to draw a conclusion by those who are in opposition to this rule change of who's worried about making the change and who isn't.
1 minute.
You're beginning to understand that those that have been helping Senator Kavanaugh are totally upset that we're going to take away one of their tools that they use to filibuster. And Senator DeBoer correctly stated, we will not cease the filibuster opportunity. We won't do that. So just listen to who's in opposition, and you can quickly conclude as to why we've wasted the first 50 days. So if you want to move on and get your bill passed and do some things that the people sent us here to do, then vote for this amendment, vote for this motion. Very simple. And you'll hear more whining as we go about why we shouldn't do this. But the fact is we can and we should.
Thank you, Senators Breezy and Senator Erdman. Senator Frederickson, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Nebraskans. Good morning, colleagues. I've been listening to this conversation, and as a freshman senator, I'm genuinely interested in this discussion. This entire session, frankly, has been fascinating as a freshman senator. And, you know, it's been highlighted a couple times that we have a process to amend the rules in here. And I'm listening to everything that's being said on the floor and trying to digest that with what I understand as the rules. And I certainly appreciate and understand the process of temporarily suspending the rules for a specific action to take. But I do, if I'm being honest, I do get a little bit of heartburn considering temporarily suspending the rules to permanently amend the rules. That gives me a little bit of heartburn, and I'm going to continue to listen to this conversation and sort of see what I can learn through the discussion throughout the day. There's been a couple of comments on what happened last week, specifically what happened last Thursday as sort of like a catalyst for this. And, you know, I want to highlight, you know, colleagues, what happens in here doesn't happen in a vacuum. So what happened last week didn't happen in a vacuum. And frankly, this entire session has not happened in a vacuum. We can't act like 574 is a normal thing because it's not a normal thing. You know, anyone paying attention to the debate last week was hearing there was so much misinformation and harmful things being said on the mic. And, you know, we're not discussing the budget. We're not talking about marginal tax rates here. You know, we're literally talking about civil rights and human rights. And that's not normal for us to be doing in here. That is not a normal thing to do. So I'm not going to be normalizing that myself. And with that, I will yield any additional time I have to Senator DeBoer.
Senator DeBoer, 2 minutes and 41 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Frederickson. I did want to make one clarifying comment. Senator Erdman, I had mentioned that I was the ranking member of the Rules Committee who opposed 574. I made no statement about parties, but about those who opposed the bill where the action was taken last Thursday. I will mention that all of this is also sort of in the same world in which we overruled the chair on a motion to cut off debate after 5 people, which the chair had ruled out of order. I think it was 5. So this is why I say it's an arms race. And colleagues, I'm tired too. I'm really tired of the arms race, of the let's see if we can find a way to do something with the rules back and forth, back and forth. I spent the weekend reading transcripts to see all the times in which this has come up before. In 1975, it came up, as I mentioned. There was a similar discussion in '89. And when I was reading these various transcripts, it was so clear what a different time it was in this body, because arms race wasn't the way of the day. there were enough folks who
1 minute.
said, we need to pay attention to the rules. So when they had these rules debate, there was no side in the rules debate except for the side of whether the rule was proper or not. And I would ask you to do that, particularly because Senator Erdman, by his own admission, says this won't stop the filibuster. And by the way, the rule proposal he had in January would not have stopped what happened on Thursday. That's how materially different it was. Because if we had adopted that rule, the same exact thing that happened last Thursday still could have happened. So this is enough materially different than that situation would not have been affected had the rule been passed that Senator Erdman was talking about. This rule, this one, which is attempted to be amended through suspension
That's
of the
time,
rules.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Frederickson and Senator DeBoer. Senator Lowe, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in favor of the rules in suspension and to amend the rules. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Linehan, you are recognized.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. So I just heard Senator Frederickson say that he was new and he's a freshman. Well, I'm old and I want to get some things done this year. And that's why I'm willing to suspend the rules. We are here. So Senator Frederickson, I'm sure you've heard this many times, but you'll hear it a lot more when we get to the budget and tax cuts. When my class got here, we were broke. We had no money. Chairman Stinner had to go through the sofas, look for all the change. It really wasn't as bad in the end because the forecast got better. But it was not a happy time. Now we're here and we have billions. We can cut taxes responsibly. We can, and there's been several of us working on this, Senator Breezy and others on the Education Committee and Revenue Committee. We've worked the whole time we've been here to get funding to rural schools. And we can do that this year. Senator Wishart and I have helped somewhat, has worked since she's been here to get 80% of special ed covered. We can do that this year. Senator Wishart has another bill that got stopped last week that's important, that had at least, I did the card, had at least 45 votes, but we didn't get to it. Senator McKinney has a hair bill that's very important to him. We didn't get to that. So yeah, I'm willing to suspend the rules. What happened last Thursday had never happened before. You have a bunch of people fill the queue, and I know maybe we shouldn't talk about last Thursday, but that's why we're here. Senator Dunggan said it was so people could listen to a debate. It wasn't a debate. Everybody, I don't know, 15, 17 motions, however many were filed, stood up, and not only did they talk about the bill, that would have maybe been okay, but they called people out by name. Took on the speaker, said he wasn't doing his job, when everybody who's speaking knew that nobody could respond. Now, when you stand up and you have a plan that you're going to belittle or call people names, and you know when nobody can respond, it's not okay. People are going to change the rules. Senator DeBoer, you just mentioned that there was a vote to overrule the chair to cut off debate too soon. I agreed. I didn't vote for it. But we all knew it was a warning that the other side was not going to keep putting up with it and putting up with it and putting up with it. The warning was not heeded. Senator Arch has been far more patient than the people I'm getting phone calls from. Far more patient. We're being laughed at, guys. Senator Dorn knows my little brother. He's not really little, but he is younger than me. He went to one of the spots where everybody gathers in Crab Orchard. You know how this is, Senator Dorn, small town. There were like, I don't know, 5 or 6 people there, maybe more. They all wanted my cell phone so they could call me and ask me why I couldn't fix this. My brother loves me, so he didn't give up my cell phone. But we have people up there, people in the lobby, people watching on TV, people reading the news, know how much good we can do this year. And this is what we're doing. It's not okay. We need to get to the business of the people who sent us here, and we need to take care of kids in schools and get funding to rural schools, take care of special ed kids, leave enough money that we can be prepared for a rainy day. There's a lot to do, and it's a lot of important things, and we need to get to it. So I'm absolutely for suspending the rules so we can get to our work done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Senator Arch would like to welcome 60 students from the 4th grade class of Hickory Hill Elementary in Papillion, Nebraska, in the South Balcony. Please stand and be recognized. Senator McKinney, you are recognized.
Thank you. As a coach, you know, suspending the rules in the middle of the game is kind of rough for me. But I wanted to bring up something else because it pertains to suspending rules or changing rules. The Department of Punitive Services proposed changes to Title 18, Chapters 2, 3, 5, 6 of the Nebraska Administrative Code. And the proposed changes remove unnecessary language according to them, reflect current policy, change terminology. The adoption of Chapter 10 promulgates rules and regulations that provide petitions to the declaratory orders as required pursuant to statutes. Why is this important? Well, number one, we have a prison overcrowding crisis. Our prisons are horrible, and the Department of Punitive Services has done nothing to make those changes but ask for money to build prisons and treat individuals that are incarcerated inhumane. So of the things that they're changing, in one of these things, it says, if an inmate chooses to send an unproposed grievance to an entity outside of NDCS, the grievance shall not be considered to be filed with NDCS and will not be entitled to a response by NDCS. Things they are striking. Petitions. Inmates may circulate petitions for signatures. They're striking that. Another thing they're striking, the petitions cannot violate or propose a violation of the department's rules or state or federal or interfere with the security or good order of the facility. They're striking that. Another thing they're striking, inmates may petition the warden or the director requesting specific relief concerning a grievance involving the department policy or practice. The petition must state the proposed change in the department policy or practice, the reason for the proposed change, and the circulator's full name and inmate number. They're striking that. They're also striking inmates supporting a petition may sign the petition. An inmate filing signing the petition shall give his or her inmate number and the date of the signature. The signatures must be legible. They're striking that. Another thing they're striking, the petition shall be attached to a step 1 grievance form and submitted to the warden within the time limits for filing step 1 grievances. Striking that. Another thing, the warden shall consider the petition when responding to grievance that the petition concerns. They're striking that. Another thing they're striking, if the inmate wants to appeal from the decision of the warden, the inmate shall attach the petition, the step 1 grievance form, and the warden's response to a step 2 grievance form and submit it to the director within time limits established for grievance appeals. They're striking that. Another thing, the warden and director will keep a copy of the petition with the record of the grievance that the petition concerns. They're striking that. Why is this important? If individuals who are incarcerated cannot work together to try to get the department to make some changes that affects their lives, we're gonna have serious problems in our prisons. So I would tell the interim director and the administration, whoever else is in charge of the Nebraska Department of Punitive Services, to not do this. This is gonna be bad. And I don't think y'all really understand how bad it's gonna be. It's potential for other bad things to happen inside of that in institutions like Tecumseh. If individuals cannot air out their grievances. Because if you didn't know or you forgot, Tecumseh is still in bad shape. Individuals for at least 3 years probably haven't even been able to visit their family because it's being so restricted. On weekends, they can't have visitations and they can't see their families. So just imagine not being able to see families, still under restriction because the department can't hire enough people and they won't allow you to file grievances or do petitions. What do y'all think is gonna happen? We need to wake up and be leaders and do something this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I stand in opposition to the rule suspension. I don't have a lot to say about this. This changes nothing for me. This doesn't inhibit my ability to do anything that I am seeking to do. I am responsible for myself. No one else is responsible for my actions. I'm offended that anyone would purport to take responsibility for what I did on Thursday. That was my actions, and I stand by them. If you want to change the rules in some way to penalize me, you should do that. This does not penalize me. This does not inhibit my ability to do anything. I'm fine with this. What this does is hurts the body and the institution, but that is a choice that you all are going to have to make as a majority. I had that conversation this weekend, and I was told that that was just fine. Everybody was comfortable with penalizing the institution, and that's where we are. But I will continue to take time. There are good things that we could accomplish this year. We just first have to hurt children. We first have to take away their dignity and their right and their access to medical care. We have to demoralize them, dehumanize them, marginalize them, attack them. But as long as we're cool with that human rights violation, Senator Linehan, then yes, we can do some good things. As long as we can do the worst possible tragic thing we could do to a vulnerable minority population, as long as that's our priority, then no, we're not going to do the rest of the good things. I'm not going to let an atrocity be perpetrated against the children, trans children of this state so that we can do anything else first. Make a choice. I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Senator Conrad.
Senator Conrad, 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
It's right here.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning again, colleagues. Just to respond to my friend Senator Moser and to channel the father of the nonpartisan unicameral legislature, one of the reasons George Norris sought this historic monumental change in our system of government was so that we could divorce ourselves from national issues that didn't impact our constituents, to give us a protective opportunity to move away from partisan rancor that has crippled our sister states and our federal government. So the response when senators in this body choose to act like Washington, choose to take a chapter out of that playbook to advance human rights abuses, that is what does not honor George Norris and his vision for this state. That is why you're not honoring your oath to serve in a nonpartisan institution. And let's be really clear about this, and let's get down to the personal. When my friend Senator Slama, Senator Kauth, Senator Brewer were attacked in the committees that I serve on by members of the public, guess who spoke up for them? Senator Conrad. Guess who called that out of order and asked that each member of this body be treated with dignity and respect? Senator Conrad. When Senator Wayne got on this floor and asked for you to call out online hate against your colleagues and their children and their family, you sat silent. Don't give me a lecture about collegiality because you don't live it. You bring it up out of context and it doesn't match your actions. And let's also be clear, thank you, Mr. President. Senator Linehan and Senator Erdman, who brought forward this proposal, have said you gotta suspend the rules and amend the rules for the remainder of the session without a public hearing, which is anathema to our process, to save the session. You could have saved the session with your vote on cloture. You could have saved the session by not putting 574 up. And let's also be clear, this won't actually save the session. There's still an ability for amendments. There's still an ability for a host of other motions. There's still an ability for an individual member or a group of members in the minority to take time on all of the bills on the agenda in innumerable ways. So not only does it fly in the face of our process.
Last time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh and Senator Conrad. Senator Wayne, for what purpose do you rise?
I rise that this motion is out of order. Although it's been scheduled, it's still out of order. There's only two ways this can happen. Either you suspend or you amend, but you can't do both. That's an improper motion before this body. There's nowhere in our rules where you talk about you can do both. So either you got to suspend Rule 2.2 first and then amend. So it'd be two separate motions, but it can't be both underneath our current rules.
Senator Wayne and Senator Arch, will you please approach? It is a ruling of the chair that the motion is properly in order. Senator Wayne, for what purpose do you rise?
I rise to overrule the chair.
Senator Wayne, please open on your motion to overrule the chair.
Thank you, colleagues. I did listen to Speaker Arch about past precedent, that there has been a past precedent where they sometimes suspend the rules. That does, as you know, the legislature in the past can't carry forth or bind us to anything. In fact, you have to look no farther than when you overrule the chairs, can you ask another senator for a question? There is precedent that you can. In fact, the last clerk for the last 6 years allowed us to do so. However, there was one ruling by Speaker Flood that said you couldn't. So this clerk decided he's going to take that rule. I will also know there's precedent on both sides, whether to suspend the rules only means for one day, whether suspend the rules indefinitely for the session means something else. There is precedent on both sides. Here's my only thing. It's okay to win. It's like UConn, FDU, all the people on the final floor. Don't worry, I'm not going to use Westside. I'm going to use Northwest High School, the school I went to. That's like you guys, the college team playing against a high school team. And we decide that we're going to circle around the ball handler and make sure you guys can't even get to the ball. And then somewhere around halftime, you're going to say, let's change the rules because you don't like how the game is being played. I understand that, but our rules specifically call for a way to do that. So the proper motion before us, and this, I'm asking everybody, step away from your and step away from the fact that you want to get stuff done. My entire legacy might not even be heard this year. I need to get stuff done. But there is a proper way for this body to do it. And the proper way is to suspend 2.2. And 2.2 says, here's how you amend the rules. So file that motion today, schedule it for tomorrow. We burn one day before you can change the rule in which you want to change. So you suspend that rule, then you file a second motion that can be heard right afterwards to amend how we're proceeding the rest of this session. This is the way you do it under the rules. Many people have been arguing this while I was listening in court, but the proper way to object is to object in a point of order that this is not proper before us. And I'm asking us to step back from our egos, step back from the willingness and willingness to go into, I'm so mad I have to get something done, because I am one of them. I have a PTSD bill that will not be heard this year if we can't get off of this filibuster. And my side of the aisle knows that I'm not happy about where we are. But nevertheless, the proper way is to suspend 2.2 and then offer a next motion to amend it. It's the cleanest and best way. It doesn't matter if there was an agreement 10 years ago, 5 years ago between the body to do this. It's not right. And it's not the plain language of the rule. It's just not. So I'm asking everybody, let's do it the right way per our rules. Let's not do it because somebody has a majority and we're trying to get things done and we didn't like how things happened. You suspend 2.2. You can write it on a yellow pad. The follow motion after that is to amend whatever else is out there. Then you take away the 3/5. It still becomes a permanent or temporary rule change. It requires 30 votes. It doesn't change anything, but we're not compiling two different motions before this body. And I'm going to end with this. There's a reason why we have a single subject matter. There's a reason why we have a single motion matter. Because it has to be clear. This is the hardest thing I know many of you guys are going to do. Step back out of your own way, back up and say, there is a way to still get to the finish line, but we got to do it in a way that preserves the rules. Preserves the rules and at least of how we get there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Each member is allowed to speak once to this issue. Members may not yield time to one another, and they may not ask questions of other senators. So with that, Senator Erdman, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that. I seen Senator Wayne come in, so I knew that they had reinforcements. Senator Wayne, I appreciate the fact that you arrived before it was too late. Most of the time in this body, we talk about the precedents of what has happened in the past until it's not to our advantage, and then we throw that out. We've done this before. We've done it before numerous times. And Senator Wayne said the cleanest way to do this is to amend 2.2 and then make another motion later to do what we want to do. That very well may be an option, but it's not one that I'm willing to consider. Senator Wayne has numerous bills that he would like to see advance. Numerous bills to help his community, the young people in his community, black and brown or whatever you want to say that they are, because those people are children of Nebraska that need our help. I understand that. And I can appreciate Senator Wayne's concern about his district. No one in this body has accomplished more for their district than Senator Wayne has. The point today is the time to move on. And Senator Wayne, I know that you're as frustrated as I am that your bills haven't had an opportunity to be heard. And I know that you don't appreciate what has happened the first 50 days. But I also understand you have to try to help your side. And I don't know if you know this, but while you were gone, Senator Bohr announced that she is the leader of the Democratic Party. So I'm sorry to break that news to you. But I'm going to vote to not overrule the chair and to move on with the business at hand, which is to pass this rule change. Senator Arch in his opening statements mentioned we've done this before. We can do this again. So when you consider what lays before us, and this may not be the rule of all rules that stops the filibuster. I didn't say that it was, but it takes one of the tools away. And if you don't think this is a significant rule change, I had a call over the weekend from two people that are in opposition to this rule change. Had we not been on the right track, they wouldn't have called me. So Senator Wayne, you can make all the statements you want about doing it right, about doing 2.2 and then coming back and amending the rules correctly. We've done this in the past, we'll do it again. If we don't do this, I suggest we just go home. I suggest we just do sine die and we go home. The governor can call us back to do the budget or whatever else is on his plate that he wants us to do. But I'm not going to sit here for 40 more days and listen to the same thing I've listened to the first 50. It's very plain and simple.
1 minute.
Uphold the ruling of the chair, vote for the rule change, and let's get on with doing what they sent us here to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Conrad, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just a quick point, do I have 5 minutes on this? I couldn't remember exactly what the type. Okay, 5 minutes, it looks like. Okay.
Yes, 5 minutes.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Good morning again, colleagues, and I want to thank my friend Senator Wayne for his smart history lesson and excellent analysis of the process and the rules that are before us, and I rise in support of his motion to overrule the chair. A couple of things that I think is critical in this debate is that Senator Erdman, my friend Senator Erdman, and I agreed that there are key questions before us. Can the legislature do this? Should the legislature do this? But what he has conveniently failed to respond to is how should the legislature do this? And Senator Wayne has helped to distill the point with his point of order and his motion to overrule the chair. The rules on its face are clear for how you go about a rules suspension and a rules amendment. And it is unprecedented. It is unprecedented to attempt this crude attempt, which is masquerading as a motion to suspend the rules, actually does four things. That's classic log rolling. That's a classic violation of single subject. The motion contains four proposals. Look at it, read it for yourselves. 1, to suspend the rules. 2, to suspend the Rule Amendment Committee hearing process. 3, to amend the permanent rule regarding priority motions to a new rule of procedure. And 4, to suspend beyond the one legislative day that typically applies to suspension to the remainder of this session. Senator Erdman concedes this will not, in fact, change the filibuster or save any time. So what is the point of this other than a punitive nature? Because you're dissatisfied with how the minority utilized priority motions to organize debate. And senators, perhaps that was something that you found distasteful. Senator Kavanaugh and others have agreed it won't be utilized again. There's no need to change the rules, but it's not good enough. We have to punish. And think how counterproductive that is. We could have already been through Senator Wishart's bill, probably nearing cloture, that we all agree upon and want, if we didn't have a 4-hour sideshow on a rules debate that is unprecedented, that is problematic, that doesn't honor our rules, that tries to do 4 things, that cuts out the public hearing. It just takes more time. It just takes more time. And it sets a terrible precedent. And Senator Erdman and his allies need to be clear. Once they set this terrible precedent, once they pull the nuclear option to carve out the public hearing, what's next? Cloture? Dilatory? More fake censure motions? Be honest about what your intentions are when you're setting this process, because you recognize this doesn't save time. You're setting a precedent to bring more punitive rules changes in the middle of debate, in the middle of the session, into this body. Be honest about what your intentions are. Be forthright about those. Because it's not about the priority motions, and it never was. And priority motions have been utilized throughout the history of this institution to jump the queue, to organize the queue. That's exactly what happened on Thursday. And after 2 days of debate with the full queue where we were trying to debate, and you kept calling the question on us. Senator Arch is dead wrong in quoting from the context of Masons about we need to protect the will of the majority. Absolutely, we need to protect the will of the majority. And you know what does that? Everything else. Everything else in the rules. Everything else in your vote. The only tool left to the minority is the filibuster, and using the rules as you all unanimously agreed to, just as we have done. Senator Arch's proposal that he brought to the Rules Committee is distinguishable, and he knows it. And it was not advanced, and it was not amended, and it was not adopted. And it applied to an individual senator, not the body as a collective. You should move to overrule the chair and honor the second house. Honor your institution, honor precedent, honor the rules. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator Vargas, you are recognized.
Thank you very much. There's a couple people have been asking me why I'm on crutches. It's because of Senator Wishart. No, it's because basketball injury. Just as so, if you see me kind of limping around here as I'm standing, just know that that's the case. I stand in support of overruling the chair, and it is really interesting. The underlying motion, I'd like to say I have a definitive opinion, but this is inherently the hard part about this, which is each and every one of you might be in support of the rule suspension. Maybe you're in support of amending the rules for the recommit, for the IPP. If you have differences of opinion on each of those different things, you can't express it because it's all jumbled up into one statement. That's the reason why we don't do this. You've heard this not only from Senator Wayne, Senator Conrad, and others. The reason we don't jumble everything up into one is because procedurally it's a mess, and you can't actually express your opinion on a single subject and make that decision and transparency clear to the public. Nobody in the public's going to know whether or not you are in support of the suspension or against that, or if you have a different opinion on the underlying amendments. You vote for one, you were saying you're a yes to all, and maybe that is the case for all of you. For people that may not be the case, that's the reason why we should overrule the chair and rule this out of order and just take up the rule suspension. Not many people have introduced a rule suspension. I mean, I think there's a few of us. I introduced a rule suspension just about 2 years ago. And for those people that were in the body, this was to suspend the rules to be able to introduce a new bill. I didn't introduce one language that said, I want to suspend the rules, introduce this new bill and amendment, and then add the amendment to a bill. I just put a motion in, the speaker scheduled it, to suspend the rules. And we debated whether or not we would suspend the rules for this purpose. And that's what we debated. That was the decision that people were voting on. That's what we ended up discussing. And it wasn't actually voting on the underlying amendment or bill. The point that I'm trying to make is that we committed to these rules. We committed to them, and nobody is saying that they're not changeable. But if we don't abide by the process that we've written down for amending our rules, then we're operating in a much more chaos, and we're sort of picking and choosing how we do it. Again, I'm not still saying that there's not an opportunity for us. The reason why we have the ability to suspend the rules is so that we can do it in extenuating circumstances. So I'm not saying that this isn't something that is allowable. What we're saying, or what I'm saying, is that there's a process to which we do it. Now, what Senator Erdman said, at least I didn't hear from him, is that he disagrees with the process going through the motions and actually suspending the rules first. I still haven't heard exactly why he's against it, other than we have to get moving. And that rationale on its own isn't enough to supersede our norms and our rules as written. It's not enough. I respect his work as a chair. I respect the vice chair's opinion as well, but it's not solely our interpretation of the rules, it's also as written. And we have to suspend the rules first. And bear in mind, this is also coming out of, there have been times in the past where there are things that I haven't always agreed with, and many of us haven't agreed with, but we utilize it within our rules. Either within, pulling things out of committee, which is in our rules. I voted for some of them, I didn't vote for some of them, but we didn't also change the rules in the middle of a session when we didn't like the way it fit our needs. And it is a precedent that we're sending. And I won't be here, many of us won't be here, at least 15, 16 of us, for what will be the new rules that are established in the next biennium. But we are setting a precedent on whether or not we are going with what we committed to, and even going with the process on how we even amend our rules in dire circumstances. So hopefully people are really considering and supporting overruling the chair so we could do it the right way. And you can still make your independent decisions.
That's
on
time,
everything.
Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Vargas. Colleague Senator Steve Erdman would like to welcome his friend Spike Gordon from Harrison, Nebraska, sitting underneath the south balcony. Please stand and be recognized. Senator Dorn, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just sitting here trying to visualize or think about what I'm going to talk, and I guess I find it kind of amazing that we've been able to do the conversation, have the conversation we have for 50 days, and the one thing we really haven't argued a long time over is rules, and now here we have rules and overriding the chair and all that, so that we have made that a part of it. I guess we don't have to have a filibuster to do this. We just call it trying to override the rules or not. One thing that I've always known since I've come up here is, especially when Speaker Hildreth was here and Senator Wayne were here, I truly enjoyed their debate. I've never been a lawyer. We always go to lawyers to have that legal part of that work done, but they have different criteria or different things, or they're able to talk about or explain things in a different way maybe. And the interesting thing that this year so far I've missed, that we've had it a few times maybe, is that type of debate that Senator Wayne and Speaker Hildreth could really have. I can remember sitting here and they just went on, and I just so enjoyed that. But they look at things sometimes a little bit different than what we do. The gist of what Senator Wayne, what I can get anyway, what he is proposing is that we wait till tomorrow and we bring this back, the rule suspension, and then we take another day and we vote on the rules in, which I don't know if that accomplishes anything or not. We're probably going to have the same outcome on this bill or this rule suspension. It's just going to take some more time and eat up some more time. And I think most of us that are here this year are wondering why we can't get things done and why the process is going the way it is. I shouldn't say wondering. We kind of know why or whatever, or have good understanding. Part of what over the weekend, though, some senators visited with me. I visited with some other senators about this rule debate and some other bills. But when you go any place, and I think Senator Linehan talked about it, when you go any place, especially in small town Nebraska, they sure come up and talk to you about what's going on here. There are a lot of people that are watching. There are a lot of people that are seeing how the process has really slowed down this year. And they talk to you about maybe some bills passing or some bills getting passed or what that number might be. There are many people that are watching this. They're not so much frustrated as they want to understand why this is happening, why this is going on, why this process has come to the slowdown or the crawl that it has taken place. Well, we're in the last 40 days now, and if I believe right, I think Speaker Arch has scheduled a late debate for tonight. We're going to have about 26, 29 days of late night debate. So this process will move. It will slowly move. We as a body are going to get to decide whether it's going to move at a faster pace or whether we're going to move at the pace we're going at now. I think if Senator Don Walton in the Lincoln paper had a tremendous article probably now 3 weeks ago that we'll have 30 to 40 bills, and some of those bills will be the budget bills if we continue to do what we're doing. That's going to be the outcome of this session. It might be less than that because we're taking up part of today. We'll take up, if this gets overruled, we'll take up the next, or doesn't get overruled, we'll take up the next couple days too, talking about this. So there's other slowdown tactics. I think we're all here for one reason, and that is how are we best serve the people of the state of Nebraska. I think when you visit with the general population, they are frustrated like a lot of us are.
1 minute.
We're not getting things done for the people of the state of Nebraska. But I'll also end with one other comment. When I was on the county board, one of the best days of the year on the county board was when the legislature sine died, because we knew they couldn't pass no more things after that. So here we are now. Maybe this is a good thing that we slowed down. I don't know. But we are not passing as many bills, I think, as many of us visioned when we came here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Dorn. Senator John Kavanaugh, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Dorn, for those comments. I thought they were pretty helpful and instructive. And the one thought that came to mind as you were speaking was the phrase that haste makes waste. And so that means that when you do something too quickly, you might do it wrong and then need to do it over again. And there's a lot of other analogies, phrases for that, measure twice, cut once, what is it? And an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and so on. But haste makes waste. And I'm not saying that in terms of saying that we're going too fast in the session. I think that that's pretty clear that we're going slower than everybody would like and not accomplishing as much as people want. And I'm in that camp. There are things I'd like to see us accomplish as well. There are things that I think will probably pass that I will not be happy about. And I'm okay with that. But when it comes to things like this rule change, this is very much a haste-making waste situation where we're doing it the wrong way, where we've conflated a bunch of issues into one motion in a way that we shouldn't do, even though I think it's clear that you could do it if you so choose, but it is the wrong way to do it. So I support Senator Wayne's motion to overrule the chair. I agree with the point of order that he raised, that the right way to do this, though different than the one I suggested before, which is having a rule filed, sending it to the committee, which the advocates for this control, and then having it scheduled in regular order on the floor, is the right way to do it because it allows for the public comment. It allows for the potential amendments to address some of the unforeseen issues in here. It allows for the actual conversation about how this rule is going to affect this body and going to move forward. And so this is a hasty way to solve this problem that has been identified. So I think that this is the appropriate thing to do. So to the point about, again, whether I would support any type of rule change, I guess I don't. I think Senator Vargas talks about this. I don't know the answer to what rule change I would support. I wouldn't support this rule change in its current form, I guess is the point. And I would like the opportunity to have a broader conversation about rules that, ways to change the rules that still protect the integrity of this body, that protect the integrity of the process, and that protect the spirit of which the rules are intended to address. And I think there is room for doing that if you don't act in haste and pass this this way. And the unfortunate thing about the way we're addressing this is it's coming from a place of spite and hurt feelings and anger about how those of us have used the rules to this point. And you've heard people say that that's not going to actually get us to the place where people want to be, which is moving at a more, I guess, fast pace going forward. And so if you are acting in haste to change the rules in a way that you shouldn't, in a ham-fisted way, and it's not going to get you the outcome you want, I guess the question is, what is the point of what we're doing? So this is, again, a haste making waste, because we're spending all of this morning, we're now almost 2 hours into debate this morning on this rule change that is not going to achieve the outcome that even the advocates, thank you, Mr. President, the advocates for this rule change are hoping to achieve. So let's take a step back. Let's send the rule to the committee. Let's have it be heard. Let's allow people to comment. Let's allow for some changes to it. But in that broader context, let's have a conversation about what's going to allow us to move forward in a productive fashion. So I support the motion to overrule the chair. I think there's, as Senator Wayne, I think, said, you'll get to your outcome. If you want to amend the rules in this fashion, you will be able to do that. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and let's do it the right way. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Mosier, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think a number of us have felt the frustration of how the session has proceeded. And as part of our dialogue along the way, numerous senators that were filibustering said, well, we're operating within the rules. We're following the rules, and your rules allow us to do this. That's a paraphrase, but it's very close to a literal quotation. So some senators have said, well, we used that last Thursday, but we won't do that again. Well, I'm not going to rely on that reassurance, because when the moment comes and the emotions run high, I think we'll be right back where we were. This rules change is not going to eliminate filibusters. You'll still be able to filibuster. You just won't be able to pack the queue all from one side and control the debate strictly in one side's favor. It'll make the filibusters a lot more work, because you'll actually have to get up and talk about the bill, and the opposition will be able to respond if they're attacked or if their issues are questioned. I only think that's fair. I don't think what happened Thursday was fair. It was allowed under the rules, the way the rules are. It was the first time it was ever used, and I give them bonus points for being the first one to think of it. But I think it's an abuse of the rules, and I think the rules should be changed to stop that kind of action from happening again. Our rules are our rules to set, to operate by, as long as we follow the Constitution. And I think Senator Erdman's motion is not a hasty way to do it. I think it's an expedient way to do it. And people in my district are frustrated. They're tired of listening to the same senators get up and go on and on and on for hours. They would like to see us do the business of the state of Nebraska. And so I support Senator Erdman's motion, and I'm not going to vote to overrule the chair. I think we need to pass this rule change and move on and try to get the business done for the citizens of Nebraska.
Thank you, Senator Mosier. Senator Day, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I have a few things that I wanted to mention, but first, I continue to hear people who are in support of this rule suspension and the rules change, talking about how it's not fair what happened last Thursday, how we abused the process of debate to stifle debate. And I want to remind everyone what we're talking about here and what we were talking about on Thursday. We're literally talking about taking healthcare away from a marginalized group of children, okay? So if we want to talk about what's fair and what's not fair, let's don't forget the subject of this entire debate. If we had a bill where we were trying to take health care away from kids who had green eyes, and you had a child with green eyes, and we were standing up saying, could you just please sit down? Can you not filibuster so much? I mean, it's absurd. We're literally talking about basic human civil rights. And people are talking about how filibustering is unfair. And let's not forget what has happened since the beginning of this session. Committees were intentionally loaded. The committee process, the norms of the committee process, selection process were circumvented. But you didn't see us motioning to amend the rules at that point. Certain bills were given priority hearings. Bills that were introduced at the 11th hour were given priority hearings over bills that were introduced on days 1 and 2 and 3. But you didn't see us trying to change the rules at that point. Hearings were manipulated to make it appear that public opinion was equal. We, including myself, who's on HHS with two of these bills came through, we deferred to the chair in those situations and even stood up for the chair in the process. You didn't see us trying to amend the rules at that point. Some senators were asked to stop talking questions or stop asking questions of testifiers. We're talking about step by step attempting to stifle debate and the opinions of the people this bill will directly affect. Bills came out of committee unamended. I sat in the exec session for this very bill, LB 574. No one was willing to bring any amendments. Senators have been strong-armed into voting for bills that they don't support. What happened on the day before Thursday, which is what we're talking about, the issues with multiple motions being filed in order to quote unquote stifle debate, was a large portion of the supporters of LB 574 got into the queue and sort of controlled debate on Wednesday, which is within the rules. We heard wild conspiracy theories
1 minute.
being touted on the floor. We had really awful, hateful things being said on the mic. You didn't see us motioning to amend the rules at that point. We tried to take the conversation back on Thursday simply to try to protect the people that are going to be most affected by this bill. And what's happening now is the only tool that we have to stop pieces of legislation like LB 574, you all are trying to change the rules on us. This process has been circumvented from the beginning of session. And now that you don't like what's happening, you're trying to change the rules. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Day. Senator Breezy would like to welcome 13 fourth graders from St. Paul's Lutheran School in St. Paul, Nebraska in the South Balcony. Please stand and be recognized. Senator Raybould, you are recognized.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Senator Wayne for standing up and pointing that what we're doing is really out of order. You know, when I was a kid growing up in Lincoln and Lancaster County, I just remember my dad always saying wherever we were traveling by car with my mom and dad, and when we got close to Lincoln and we were just going to cross the border where it says Lancaster County, my dad would always say, Lancaster County, the county of law and order. But I think what we are doing today is really out of order and not becoming our unicameral and not becoming a county that I am really so proud of. You know, Senator Breezy talked about that we shouldn't stifle debate. And I agree in principle with that, but what I really would like to see stifled is some of the hurtful, hateful bills that are brought before us. You know, Senator McKinney said it so clearly that we should be focusing on legislation that helps Nebraska families. We need to be debating pressing issues like workforce shortage, affordable housing. There are so many great pieces of legislation that we had hearings on that would certainly benefit so many Nebraskans all across our state looking to purchase their first home, creating more affordable housing for a workforce that we hope to attract and retain. Childcare. Childcare is so fundamental to families in Nebraska. Affordable childcare. Senator Linehan spoke very clearly about educational funding reforms. That is essential. That goes directly to our property taxes. Why aren't we focusing on that? We need to be focusing on criminal justice reforms. We're a state that has far too many people incarcerated and far too many people of color incarcerated. You know what really troubles me? When Senator Erdman got up and said he wished we would all stop whining. You know, using those terms in this body, it has no place. It really demeans the speaker, and it truly demeans the body. You know, Senator Lowe and Senator Mosher both said very clearly, I wrote it down, we need to amend the rules. We need to amend the rules. And I agree, we need to amend the rules, but there is process and procedures. There is order to doing this, just as the debate has been going forward before everyone here. We follow the rules. We abide by the rules. If you want to change the rules, Senator Erdman, go ahead and file the motion with the Rules Committee. Set up a hearing. Invite the public to participate. Nebraskans have thoughts on this. We can change the rules. I'm happy to change the rules if we all go through the proper procedures and order. And for us to overrule the chair, that's the right thing to do. That is absolutely the right thing to do. So I ask you today, let's follow the rules. And again, I'm going to read the rules just to make sure. We adopted the permanent rules right here in this orange booklet I'm holding. It says the permanent rules may be amended. They can be amended by 3/5 majority of the vote of the members elected, provided provided, there is a big caveat that they say provided, any proposed amendment must first be referred to the Committee on Rules for consideration and report. They generate a report, they come back to us, and then we take action on that report. There's processes and procedures, and I'm really proud that
1
this
minute.
unicameral certainly follows those. We have been following the prescribed rules and procedures of debate. That's the way it works. That's the way it always worked. In any governmental body, you must follow the rules of the chamber. And I ask that we vote to overrule the chair on this matter. The debate going forward is out of order. Senator Erdman can do the appropriate thing, refer it to the Rules Committee, set up a hearing, invite our fellow Nebraskans to offer their comments and participate, and then we can start suspending the rules. If we could file a motion to suspend the rules on certain things, that would be great. But like everyone has been saying, who are lawyers and trained to talk about this in a more proficient way than I can, follow the rules of debate, follow the permanent rules that we all have voted on and adopted. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Raybold. Senator Blood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, I stand in support of overruling the chair. I have to go back to my freshman year right now. When you are a freshman, you are given a sheet of paper and you are asked to give 3 choices as to where you want to sit in the chambers. And I had only one choice, and that was to sit next to, can I get the gavel? There's all kinds of chattering over here and I can't think. Thank you. I chose purposely to sit next to Senator Ernie Chambers. And the reason that I purposely chose to sit next to him, I believe that's Senator Hughes's seat now, is because I knew from a very young age that Senator Ernie Chambers understood the rules and how to utilize the rules to his benefit. And I also learned a lot about the body, because when Senator Chambers would slow things down, people on the mic would act tough and say things like this is not necessary and we have to keep moving forward and why aren't we moving forward? And then they would come to him and snivel. Please, Senator Chambers, my bill is next up. Can you just stop this so we can move on? And you would have been surprised how many people came to him and begged him to stop. And sorry, there's someone with their phone on over here. And it taught me a lesson. And the lesson is that people, which we already know as adults, aren't necessarily who you think they are on the mic when you compare them to what they're doing behind the scenes. And I think that that's part of what's going on today. I want to go back to why I think all of this started. I believe Senator Kavanaugh believes that when you see something that's not right, not fair, not just, that you have to speak up. And that is what she did. And you may not like the fact that this was started because she felt such strong convictions, but our rules allow her to do this. And when you say something's not fair, you've already heard people say, well, yeah, the committees weren't fair this year. The way things were pushed through this year wasn't fair. You can't whine about one thing, and I know that Senator Raybold says she doesn't like that word, but there is people whining on the floor today. You gotta figure out what's just, what's right, what's balanced. The one thing that we're not ever hearing is what's the end game? That's what I hear from my constituents, and maybe that's not what you're hearing because maybe people just want to complain and you're not having the conversation. But when I talk to people, it isn't that we've drugged things out, because this is not the first time this has happened, friends. It's that people want to know what the end game is. To say that nothing like this has ever happened is not necessarily true. You know and I know that this legislature has been slowed down many, many times, and things still ended up getting done because people decided to work together, not against each other, regardless of party, regardless of ideology, and they got things done. So instead of trying to change the rules, which clearly you should not be doing in the middle of the session, why aren't we figuring out what the end game is and how we're going to resolve this? Because I will continue to support the fact that Senator Kavanaugh stood up for what she believed, what she believed was not fair, what was not just, because it is the most marginalized people in Nebraska that we forget frequently when it comes to our debates and the bills that we pass. And we seem oblivious to the fact that these people need our help. And to utilize that on the mic as the reason why we need to move forward is counterproductive. We need to move forward because we need to find our end game. And what does that look like and how do we get there? But I'm not seeing that from very many people right now. And that's something I'd like to hear from you. With that, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Duncan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in favor of the motion to overrule the chair. I appreciate Senator Wayne articulating, I think, what a number of us had sort of been getting at, not really dancing around, but sort of talking about the broad strokes. But I appreciated him kind of cutting to the quick with regards to what the issue is with what we're talking about here. And at this point, we're not even really talking about what happened last Thursday, and we're not even really talking about sort of the, in my opinion, the ongoing filibuster or anything like that. I think we're talking about whether or not we as a body are going to continue to abide by the rules, as was just pointed out, that we adopted. And when I first came to this body, I was asking a lot of questions about sort of the process, the procedure, and everyone tells you read the rule book. And it was surprising to me that there was not any sort of arbiter of what is correct and what is not beyond how many votes you can get. And what I mean by that is obviously we have this rule book in front of us that we are obliged to follow, but in the event that there's a suspension of the rules, which only requires, I believe, 3/5 majority of the votes, then you can just do essentially whatever you want. But the rules do contemplate checks and balances on a motion to suspend the rules. And so, as was already pointed out, I believe even by Speaker Arch, a motion to suspend the rules is not intended to just suspend the rules into perpetuity. It's intended to suspend the rules for a certain purpose. However, as I pointed out earlier, Rule 2, Section 2 separates out a motion to suspend the rules and then a motion to amend the rules. Senator Wayne, I think, very articulately stated what needs to happen in order for that to go through its normal process and procedure. And I believe Senator Erdman stood up and said, yeah, we could do that, I just don't want to. And I understand the frustration. I understand the irritation, again, that a number of people have with what's been going on in this body. I think everybody's frustrated for various reasons. Tensions are certainly rising. But to say, yes, there is a proper procedure that one could follow, I simply don't want to, I think is something I take issue with, respectfully. The language that we're looking at here, the motion, and I've raised this with a number of people in the body here, it says motion to suspend the rules, Rule 2, Section 2, Rule 3, Section 4F, and Rule 7, Section 6, to provide that for the remainder of the 108th legislature, first session, only one motion to postpone to a time certain, to commit, or to postpone indefinitely shall be offered on the same day at the same stage of the bill or proposition. So it starts with motion to suspend the rules and articulates then what rules it seeks to suspend, and then it says to provide that. My reading of that language is that it's not a motion to amend and a motion to suspend. It's a motion to suspend, and then to provide that, it then gives the purpose for why the motion is being suspended. And so, as I was sort of saying the last time I was on the mic, even if this passes, I think it's just a motion to suspend. But for the person who is proposing this motion to stand up and say that this absolutely is a motion to amend and a motion to suspend, I think is not only inaccurate as to how it's actually written, but I think it's especially problematic that there's a blatant admission on the record that this is circumventing the process and procedure. The reason I think that having the actual hearing on this motion to amend would be beneficial is there are reasons to amend it and reasons not to amend it that I think the Rules Committee could hear and ask questions about. And I think there's legitimate debate as to how this rule differs from the one that was previously heard.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've already pointed out the fact that the rule that was heard by the committee earlier in the session was limiting these to one person, not to the entire body. And I think my roommate, Senator Kavanaugh, pointed this out well, that what this proposed rule does is it binds other members of this body to the decisions that other senators make. And to have your ability to file motions on a bill limited by the decisions that other members of this body make could be incredibly problematic. There are perfectly legitimate reasons for multiple people to file multiple priority motions on a bill. And so to have your autonomy as a senator removed by the actions that somebody else takes, I think is very problematic and frankly, I think deserves or warrants a discussion amongst the Rules Committee. So for all those reasons, I would, again, ask my colleagues to vote to overrule the chair. We can talk about the rule amendment, but I think it needs to go through the normal process and procedure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Duggan. Senator McDonald would like to welcome 130 Jobs for America's graduates from across the state of Nebraska in the South Balcony. Please stand and be recognized. Senator Merman, you're recognized.
I yield my time. I think I actually dropped out of the queue.
All right, thank you, Senator Merman. Senator DeBoer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. December 24th through 26th, 1914, something quite interesting happened. Two armies faced each other across the field. Many of their dead lie in the field. There were terrible conditions in the trenches on both sides of that field. That was World War I. One of the ugliest things that has happened in human history was that war. But on December 24th through 26th, there was something called the Christmas peace. The armies negotiated a brief armistice in which they did not fire at each other, but came together, ate together, drank together, and played games together. Colleagues, that's what I want for us. I want a moment in this time out of time, which is what a rule suspension is, to try to trust each other again. And I know there's no reason. There were no reasons for those folks to trust each other. I saw a reenactment on a television program one time, and the first guy out there is going out with his hands up, thinking, I'm probably going to get shot. I wasn't trying to say that I was the leader of anyone here. I do not think that I am. I'm saying I failed to lead because I wanted to try to be one of those first people with their hands up, walking into the center of this war which we have found ourselves in. And I said I would support the underlying rule change, although I think it is just as dangerous, because then all you have to do is be the first one to file any of these motions, and you just withdraw them, and then no one can bring them, even if they had a real legitimate reason for bringing them. When we create rules, they can always be used as shields and as swords. I had this whole vision this weekend that, so stupid now, that I would talk to all of you and I would say, let's give peace a chance. Let's at least get the procedure right. We'll go with you on the rule, but let's get the procedure right. I'll support the underlying rule change, but come with me on the procedure. I'm not going to use up my whole time, and I won't speak again on this entire rules change. I had said yield me time, but I don't know what the point is. I've made my point. This is something I will support if we do it the right way. Transcribers, put this in bold. This is not a precedent for the future.
One minute.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Senator Ibaugh and Senator Jacobson would like to welcome 100 members of the Nebraska Association of County Extension Board from across the state of Nebraska in the North Balcony. Please stand and be recognized. Senator Breezy, you are recognized. Senator McKinney, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise again because we really have to think about what we're doing, especially when we're changing rules in the middle of the game. Especially when you're in a position of actually majority to change the rules. Like Senator Wayne referenced with the Final Four and those type of things. We have to be careful about that, because if we start a process or we start a game or we start the legislative session and we have a set of rules, and then in the future, we're 30 days in and it's like, oh, it's not going right. Let's change the rules to make sure it works out. I think it's a super slippery slope for a lot of bad things to happen in the future if we adjust the game during the game. It's just a fact. We have to be careful and protect what we as a body voted to operate as in this session. It's not ideal. I do have things that I do think are very, very important that need to get across the finish line this session. But we have to be careful and tread lightly that we do it in a manner that we don't subvert the institution and the rules. You take this somewhere else, you'll probably be able to get it anyway, but just let's do it the right way. And I think that's all people are asking is, no matter if the change happens or not, whether you're for it or against it, let's go through the proper channels to get it done. And so it's just fair. That's what fairness is, going through the proper channels to get it done. And it's not about whether I like it or somebody else likes it. We go through the proper channels. We use the rules how we voted to use them during the session, and we go that route. When we start adjusting the game in the middle of the game, that creates unintended consequences and probably more issues down the line. Maybe not in this session, but maybe next year or the year after. That's kind of where I'm at on this. So thank you, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, goodness, lots of static today. I was in the queue to talk on the rules change, but I'll speak to the motion here. I rise in support of the motion to overrule the chair. I listened to Senator Wayne's comments about the process and on just the single subject matter issue alone, it seems appropriate that we would be approaching this rules debate differently. Senator McKinney, I think, really just said exactly what needed to be said. You can do this. You can do this by following the process set forth by this body. You can do this the right way. You can go through all of the right processes to make a rules change if that's what the body wants to do. Or you can blow up the session. And I view a suspension of the rules to change the rules on day 51, as blowing up the session. If that's what 30 plus individuals in this body want to do, then that's what they want to do. We have become lackadaisical in our fidelity to the process. I appreciate Senator Wayne coming this morning and making the point that we aren't doing this the correct way. I think a lot of people have made the point this morning that we're not doing this the correct way. And mostly this is just being done as retribution to my efforts to filibuster the session. And it does not really change, dissuade, minimize my efforts. I will just pivot to a different effort until you have dismantled the entire rule book, page by page, line by line. I will find a way. If that is what this body wants to do, then that is what this body wants to do. You are the ones that will look foolish in history, that you couldn't govern and lead and be true to the spirit of your own rules without dismantling your own rules. I will continue. This doesn't stop me. This does take up extra time that we could be debating bills. This does support what I am attempting to achieve, which is less time for legislation. I hope the irony of that is not lost on this body. I am happy to have a rules debate this morning. I am happy to have a rules debate this morning. I do not need to be working on a bill this morning. This is fine. If this is how you all want to spend your time, this is terrific. You are giving me disproportionate power in this body by constantly reacting to how I am conducting myself in this body and trying to change the entirety of how this body conducts itself. You are giving me disproportionate power. That's fine. I'll take the power if you want to give it to me. You want to give me the power? I'll take the power. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Lowe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in support of the rule suspension, and I will not be overruling the chair. Why are we here? Why are we here? Well, for those of you at home who really can't see this, but for those of you in the balcony, for those of you who have been in the legislature, there's a little monitor that we have up in the front of the floor here that has the queue on it. Who's speaking next? There's also a couple now in the back of the floor that people can see that are closer for those in the back. And last week, the queue was fully loaded. We had everybody that was willing to speak listed up there. In the past, Senator Chambers and a few others have used priority motions to skip to the front of the queue to make a point. But last week, they used it to stall completely a full day. A full day. Not to make a point, but just to talk, which is a one-sided story because they dropped 15 priority motions and then withdrew them, not intending for them to go to a vote ever. That's a stall tactic. And to say that we are wasting a day by discussing the rule suspension today, well, they want us to take it to a committee. And what would we be doing today? They'd be filibustering a bill today. We wouldn't be getting any further, so don't let that come up. We would still be talking about the same thing. We're not talking on the bills. We haven't been talking on the bills. They have just been filibustering. They have not been at all talking on the bills. So I'd like to see us come to a vote on this. There are only 2 more in the queue. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Jacobson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in, first of all, opposition to the motion to overrule the chair. I do support the, there we go. Do something with it. There we go. Now it's on. Pardon me. What are we doing? It works now? We're good? Okay. So you can hear me. That's a bad thing or a good thing? All right. So I'm rising in opposition to the motion to overrule the chair. I do support the motion to suspend the rules. I want to take us through a little bit of perspective right now on where we've been, how we got to where we are. Okay. Probably started with elections. I'm part of 17 new freshmen that came into this body. And all of our constituents voted this past November, and they selected people that were to represent their views in this body. And I know, for one, I know what my constituents asked me to do. I knocked on roughly 5,000 doors. I heard some very strong concerns that they had. They wanted taxes reduced, particularly property taxes. There was a strong feeling on abortion reform. I have a strong pro-life group of constituents that also matches my personal views. I can tell you that the views across the state vary. And so for anyone to come in here and say, this is how I feel, and if I don't get my way, I'm going to shut down the session, I think is problematic. And I don't think we're being collegial and caring about all of our colleagues and allowing the process to work, which, as I've heard all of us talked about, is let's let the process work. The way the process works is not gaming the rules. This started to begin with on the Committee on Committees. I don't know of any rules that were violated on the Committee on Committee report, but remember all the outrage we went through on the Committee on Committee reports and recommit to committee and all of the things that were done there to object to that. Every step of the way, we've had obstacles. Never before. I was here for part of last year, and it was contentious towards the end of that session. And I can tell you, I never remembered having a call of the House to do a roll call vote to adjourn the session. I didn't see that before. It's a voice vote typically to adjourn to the next day. But yet we've had delaying tactics all along. Then we got 574, very controversial bill. Strong feelings on both sides of that issue. And guess what? An amendment was brought that would significantly change that bill to where the only thing that would happen that would be restricted is surgical procedures on a minor. But yet nobody wants to talk about that because it was blocked. It was blocked by those who are concerned about the bill because they want the bill in its entirety to be voted on. So we voted on it. You had the opportunity to change it. Still have the opportunity to change it the next round. Or we're going to take it to the finish line. That's what's holding the session up right now. That's why this rule change is necessary. Because my constituents and all of our constituents want other things done. We didn't come down here for a single issue.
1 minute.
We've got other work to do, and we need to do that. This is not going to end filibusters. We understand it. If your goal is to sit here and blow up the session, go for it. Okay? I'm not sure that's what your constituents want. I know it's not what mine want, but I'm going to have to concur with Senator Lowe. If we weren't arguing about this rule change, we'd be filibustering other rules. So at some point, and it all culminated with last Thursday, we reached the point where it's time to do something different. And that's why we are where we are today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Hunt, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, a lot of you speak with your mic like this, horizontal in front of you. And I think aesthetically that looks better for sure, but the receiver is not the length of the styrofoam microphone. The receiver's in the tip of the microphone. And so if you put it like this, there's several of you who do this and I can never hear what you're saying. So Senator Jacobson, that was the problem with your mic, not that it wasn't on. We are blowing up this session. The session's over. The session's over and it's on your terms because the terms were made clear to you for the last 4 to 6 weeks. And you ignored that. You didn't care. Hating trans kids in Nebraska is more important to you than the rest of this entire session. And that message is received loud and clear. Senator Jacobson, nobody wanted to talk about his little amendment. Well, we're never going to get to your amendment, Senator Jacobson. We're never going to get to your hateful, bigoted amendment on your hateful, bigoted bill because it's not going to come up because the session's over and we're blowing up every single bill. How could you do that? That's not what my constituents want. We told you over 6 weeks ago this was happening. You had 100 opportunities to act different, to deal, to negotiate. The numbers of meetings we had over the weekend, people calling us, constituents calling, going, how can we support you? You must be exhausted. How can we help you stand up for LGBTQ youth in the community in Nebraska? They're right, we're exhausted trying to negotiate with you when you're not bringing anything to the table. So don't blame this on anybody but yourselves. It's not Senator Michaela Cavanaugh's fault. It's not my fault. It's not Senator Conrad's fault. It's not Senator Day's fault. It's nobody but your own because the terms were made completely, explicitly clear to you, and you supported that bigoted bill anyway. I came in here thinking the whole session was going to be about abortion. That's what I was expecting over the past year. You know, when we defeated the abortion ban last year, that blew everybody's minds, mine included. I can't believe we did that in Nebraska. I was very proud. And when we didn't have a special session to ban abortion, I was very proud of that. I thought that there's no way that Senator Pete Ricketts would leave the governorship without getting that done for his state, but he did. And that was a massive win to me. And we expected at least one type of abortion ban to be introduced this year, and at least one was. And I think I and a lot of my like-minded colleagues in the legislature, I won't say Democrats because it doesn't work that way here, we all thought that that would take up most of the oxygen this session. And all of the mental, intellectual calisthenics I was doing over the interim and leading up until we came into session in January was to prepare for that. But I was completely wrong. It's the ban on trans healthcare that's taking up all the oxygen this session. Senator Jacobson brought up that this started with committee on committees. Yeah, it did. And you know what, Senator Jacobson, you were part of the problem then too, because you were on committee on committees. And when we were sitting in that hearing room, figuring out who's going where, you admitted in front of God and everybody that you never even looked at anybody's preference sheet. That is the evidence and the proof right there in one sentence that you said that we are not thinking critically or independently about the gravity of the responsibility we have in this body. You're taking marching orders from day one. You don't need to look at the preference sheets, Senator Jacobson, because you already know who's supposed to go where on these committees. So we can crack them and pack them.
1 minute.
Bring out all of the different bills that we want to bring out. And then when people oppose that, then you change the rules. You guys can't stand to be uncomfortable for 1 minute. And you did get to speak on the trans healthcare ban. You all spoke and you said very hateful, you said very untrue, literally medical misinformation. And then calls to the suicide hotline in Nebraska of trans youth skyrocketed that day. That's on you. One of you needed to be not voting. And you couldn't have the courage to do that. Some of you are trying to bring a spreadsheet to a knife fight. This isn't an intellectual, psychological, theoretical exercise about rules are and aren't. This is a fight for human rights that are hanging by a thread in this state, and the session is over. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Wayne, you are recognized to close on your motion to overrule the chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I coach a lot of youth sports, and I'm not comparing us to youth, although sometimes I don't know if we're in high school or elementary, depending on the day. But I used to always tell even my high school and college kids that I coach that, once you score, act like you did it before. Act like it's not a surprise and you got to hang on the rim after you dunk, or you hit a three, have to talk trash all the way down the court. Like, act like you know how to score and you scored before. It just looks so much, I always use the word smoother, but I'm a little aged now, I guess. We know filibusters are going to happen, and even the introducer of this rule change will admit that you're still going to filibuster. So it doesn't stop that. And in fact, it doesn't stop, which we've always seen, whoever punches in the queue first. I remember the Gang of 27, or whatever that was, but they would line up the queue for the first 20 people and you wouldn't get to hear. There's still ways to make sure another side is barely debated on any issue, whether this rule changes or not. But what I'm a little leery of is setting a precedent that when we don't like it, we're not just going to suspend it, we're going to amend it. And everybody up here can read this rule change and realize that it is a motion to suspend and amend at the same time. You don't have to be an attorney to read that. And the easiest thing to do is when you have the votes, to pause and restrain yourself from just going with the vote, because you have the votes to do it. But that doesn't make it right. And I don't even want to use the word right. I don't even want to use the word fair, because all of that deals with kind of moral and whatever, and it ain't even about that. Just read the rule. The rule that should be suspended is 2.2, and the following motion after that should be to amend the rules and add this amendment. It should not be a combined motion. And if we were to step back, and if this would have happened on day 15 after a rules hearing, you would all agree. But we're making an emotional decision. And when you make emotional decisions, whether they are right or wrong, they always get perceived as not right. Just facts. There was an emotional decision to split OPS on an amendment on this floor. Whether that was right or wrong, we never get to that debate because it just seemed weird, irregular, not part of the way we do business down here. Regardless of data showing that over 55,000 kids is not usually the best school districts, it's around 25 to 30,000. That goes out the window because we dealt with emotion. We deal with irrational thoughts when we're emotional and we just want to fix it because we're tired of listening to debate. I submit to you that if you go through the process, I would probably be on the other side of this rules debate. I think once something's on the board,
1 minute,
and you pull it just to pull it, that's probably wrong. but there's a way of doing it. And you heard the introducer of this rule say it in his own words. This is a big change. You heard Senator Breezy, our exec board chair, say anytime we change the rules, it is a big change. So why not have a hearing and why not break this out? Why not vote to suspend the rules and vote to amend the rules? Nothing changes, but you delay it by 1 day. So colleagues, I'm asking you to step back from your emotion. I'm asking you to step back from the frustration and not just preserve this institution, whether you think it needs to be preserved or not, whether you respect this institution or not, but respect how we got here and where we are today. Vote yes on overruling the chair, and let's do this the right way. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. This motion will require 25 votes to be adopted. There's been a request to place the House under call. All those in favor vote aye. All those in favor vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
27 ayes, 5 nays to place House under call.
The House is under call. All unexcused senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. While waiting, Senator Janet Hughes would like to welcome her mother-in-law, Virginia Hughes, brother-in-law, Doug Grimmel, and sister-in-law, Vicki Grimmel from Seward, Nebraska, sitting underneath the south balcony. Please stand and be recognized. All unexcused members are present. There has been a roll call vote in reverse order. Mr. Clerk. This is on a motion to overrule the chair.
Senator Wishart, voting yes. Senator Wayne, voting yes. Senator Walls, voting yes. Senator Von Gillern, voting no. Senator Vargas, voting yes. Senator Slama, voting no. Senator Sanders, voting no. Senator Reapy, voting no. Senator Raybold, voting yes. Senator Merman, voting no. Senator Mosier, voting no. Senator McKinney, voting yes. Senator McDonald, voting no. Senator Lowe, voting no. Senator Lippincott, voting no. Senator Linehan, voting no. Senator Kauth, voting no. Senator Jacobson, voting no. Senator Ibach, voting no. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Holcroft, voting no. Senator Hardin, voting no. Senator Hansen, voting no. Senator Holleran, voting no. Senator Geist, voting no. Senator Frederickson, voting yes. Senator Erdman, voting no. Senator Dungan, voting yes. Senator Dover, voting no. Senator Dorn, voting no. Senator Decay, voting no. Senator DeBoer, voting yes. Senator Day, voting yes. Senator Conrad, voting yes. Senator Clements, voting no. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator Breezy, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting no. Senator Brandt, Voting no, Senator Bostelman. Voting no, Senator Bostar. Voting yes, Senator Blood. Voting yes, Senator Ballard. Voting no, Senator Armendariz. Voting no, Senator Arch. Voting no, Senator Albright. Voting no, Senator Aguilar. Vote is 16 ayes, 32 nays, Mr. President, on the motion to overrule the chair.
The motion fails. Clerk for announcements. I raise a call.
Mr. President, some items. Legislative Bill 91, your Committee on Transportation and Telecommunications, chaired by Senator Geist, reports Legislative 91 and Legislative Bill 688 to general file, both having committee amendments. Additionally, new LR from Senator Brandt. That'll be laid over. The Appropriations Committee will hold an executive session on March 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st in room 1307 over the lunch hour. Finally, Mr. President, priority motion. Senator Geist would move to recess the body until 1 o'clock.
The question before the body is to recess until 1 o'clock. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. We are in recess.